A clash of the seasons is ahead, with much cooler like air continuing to prevail from much of the east, and much warmer air will really start to build for those areas out west. So we're going to break down the details for you over the next 7 days. Here is your overall jet stream. You can see how far north it continues to buckle. That is that warmer anomalies and the high pressure that's really starting to build with the south wind coming in, and that's really going to amp up those temperatures later on this afternoon. In fact, Phoenix is likely going to hit 100 degrees for the first time this season, but it's completely the opposite for those areas out west, as we have more of a northwest flow and more of a buckle, and the jet stream continues to drain down some of those colder anomalies up there in Canada. But we also have a concern for some possible severe weather, and especially for areas that just don't need it later on this afternoon. I think it all gets going around 5 o'clock. But for today, we've got plenty of warm air to talk about. Here's the overall setup. In fact, we've got about 16 potential record high temperatures that likely could unfold. All those areas encircled, those could be reaching record levels all the way from the desert southwest, where it's just been bone dry, but lifting all the way further north with that jet stream lifting all the way into Canada. And we could be seeing even some record high temperatures for even areas of in Idaho. And you can see the definitely difference of 90s really starting to build across the south. But wow, look at that, folks. We've got 40s. These are actual high temperatures for much of the Great Lakes, continuing into portions of the mid-Atlantic and much of the Northeast. We've got highs in the 40s. That is definitely a chilly-like air mass. But here's the overall jet stream, and where that clash is going to ensue is where the colder air comes in from the Northeast, but we've got the warm air building, and that's typically the battle zone where we could unfold across areas that we just don't really need the rain or even severe weather. But unfortunately, we do have a slight risk from the Storm Prediction Center that they have put out for this area. I think it all gets going around 5 o'clock. Obviously, this area has been crushed lately with extensive flooding and numerous tornadoes and very high winds. This is the last thing they want to see, but a lot of the similar areas could get hit again today, likely after the 5 o'clock time frame, and much of Paducah back into the Little Rock region, shifting into Memphis, as well as into all the way further south into Birmingham and getting into the Huntsville region. There could be actually 2 rounds that could unfold. I think the first round gets going around 5 o'clock. So these are going to be isolated cells. This is typically not a tornado setup, but we could be seeing some larger hail, especially with these renegade supercells that kind of break out and they remain isolated. Some of these could be some large hail producers, some quarter size hail. Can't even rule out some golf ball size hail falling out of this atmosphere. But I think things get going around the Paducah region around 5 o'clock, and those are going to be diving southeast bound. But I think another area of disturbed weather about 9 o'clock is actually going to form kind of the similar areas. So it could be several rounds of severe weather on an isolated basis as you head into the evening time frame. If we expand the view and take a look at the overall big picture, that's really the only setup in town for today, is this little disturbance that will be really highlighted across the Tennessee Valley for those areas that really just don't need. And then as we swing up into the mid-Atlantic, getting into the West Virginia region, as well as into Pennsylvania, we'll be watching for an area of low pressure center that likely starts to form off the Carolina coast, and that could slowly drift northbound as we head into the weekend, aggravating those rain showers and continuing to produce and fall into some of that colder air. These are actually high temperatures as we go into Friday time frame, as the northwest flow continues to hang on, pulling down some of that colder air from Canada. Well, again, we've got numerous highs in the 50s, but once you swing into Ohio, you're back into the 40s, even the low 40s in areas of Ohio, back into West Virginia, Pennsylvania, even New York might not even get out of the 30s in areas. So it's definitely going to be a chilly air mass as we head into your Friday time frame. And there is the low pressure center that will likely form off the East Coast. and it's just kind of meandering. It's not really have kind of low steering current, so it's really going to start to just hug the coast and then eventually start to head out to sea. But in its wake, it will likely produce some more scattered to moderate, even some heavier rains at times for good areas across the East Coast. So if you look at the overall precipitation over the next 24 hours between that Friday morning and Saturday morning, kind of looks like this. We've that low pressure center originating off the Carolina coast, and then it lifts northbound back into areas of Virginia, into Delaware, back into New Jersey. Those areas across Long Island could get about an inch of rain, maybe an inch and a half in some of these isolated areas. And this goes up the coast into Rhode Island, back into Massachusetts, Connecticut. Those areas do expect kind of a chillier rain going into Friday and really lasting much of the day on Saturday. But it's completely the opposite for much of the areas out west. So they're just going to be dominating for that ridge of high pressure that's typically sinking air, and it's very difficult to cause vertical lift in that type of atmosphere. So that's why you kind of remain on the overall drier side. But we're still going to amp up those temperatures. So it continues as that ridge will likely start to continue to build and lift a little bit further north and actually try to shift a little bit further east. The colder anomalies that stand out is the far northwestern portions of the U.S. back into Washington and Oregon, as well as into Idaho, portions of Montana, and of course these areas across the east. Everywhere else, you're pretty much on the warmer side, if not almost you can consider it hot further south into the upper 90s, if not into 100 degrees for those desert Southwest. These are the areas that heat up quicker because they're much drier. They're begging for rain, and I just don't see much in the picture, especially for the next 7 days with this overall setup. It's fairly quiet on the severe weather front with a warmer west and a colder east. That typically is completely the opposite for severe weather. So we're not really expecting much other than that little setup that we have that's going on for right now or later on this afternoon for those areas into the Tennessee Valley. But it's been very busy, folks. It's not like it hasn't been busy. I don't need to tell you, it's been extremely busy. So this is kind of nice to see this little respite of more or less tamer like air mass or conditions. But yeah, the Storm Prediction Center is continuing to do surveys on all the damage that left unfold from last week. We're up to 513 tornadoes. That is actually an all-time record for this time of year, this early on in the season. So yes, we're already on pace. So we're definitely going to enjoy this little respite and the severe storms, at least while we have it, because we all know it's eventually going to come back, but not in the short term, because as we even roll the calendar in the next week, it still remains an overall quieter time. I mean, as the overall jet stream is well north, we've got much warmer air continuing to build out west, and we have another reinforcing shot of colder air coming in for the east. I mean, look at the 540 line coming back down south again in Iowa, as we have this little clipper system that's going to be raking across the areas of the Great Lakes. And further to the south, it could likely produce some showers and thunderstorms on the tail end of that, back into Ohio, back into Indiana again. And those will likely swing into Pennsylvania, as we get deeper into that Monday timeframe. And then the low pressure center will shift all the way up into Quebec and Ontario. So yeah, more snow for them. And then, of course, you'll have the colder anomalies building further south back into Kentucky, as well as into Pennsylvania, as getting into Virginia. But it kind of looks like this. You got the ridge, more or less the ridge out west and the trough out east. So we've got this kind of 1-2 punch of the system coming in today. And then we got a reinforcing shot as we head into Monday of next week. And it just kind of sits there, right? You got this continuing to flow coming in out of Canada and bringing those cooler anomalies for much of the east. And then it's completely the opposite with more of a south and southwest wind, with those warmer anomalies really building out west. And that will likely continue for much of next week, even into Wednesday and Thursday of next week. You can see the gradient here. We've got 15 to 20 degrees above average temperatures for much of the central and western 2/3 of the U.S. And then we've got completely the opposite of that, 10 to 15 degrees below average temperatures. It just tries to hang on to more of a wintry type air mass with much cooler air out east. And even if you break it down for the next 7 days, yes, predominantly those colder anomalies extend all the way from the Great Lakes down through the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, get into the southeast. Even much of the Florida could experience those cooler anomalies for really much of the week. And then of course well west, for if you kind of draw a gradient or maybe along the I-35 corridor, maybe westbound, you're likely going to feel those warmer anomalies, and it feels a little bit of a taste of summer, if you will, for those areas out west. Well, if we break down the precipitation, we've really got that one system that comes in later on this afternoon, and then we've got that low pressure center that will kind of traverse up the coast, and it could take your little sweet time. So if you add up the totals for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday over a kind of a 3-day period, you're going to get some healthier totals in Virginia, into Maryland, the DC region. This is a chilly rain. I mean, you're not going to even get out of the 40s this weekend for highs. You're definitely going to feel it, as a chilly like air mass is going to continue to prevail for much of the week, and really even going into next week. But much of the west and the central US kind of remains on the drier side for at least for the next 7 days between now and say the 17th of April timeframe. And if we look at the overall seasonal drought, what the Climate Prediction Center kind of put out, it almost kind of matches what we're looking at here. And so for areas that will see that ridge really start to build, those are areas that are in brown that are already in a drought, that we're looking to continue to enjoy a drought, if not deepen, and for those areas into the drought. So the overall setup continues to prevail. So much of the areas that technically don't really need the rain continue to get more for those areas out east. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch my next update. Why I protect you before and after the storm.